and then I'm out.
Oh, you don't want to stay?
So
No, I want to.
wait, did you? How do we know when it starts?
You're on.
Oh, it's already started. Thank you, comrade. Welcome to the Pan-African Film Series, hosted by AAPRP Southwest. We do it every second Saturday of the month. We've been doing this for quite a while. We used to do this in person at a local high school. So we're so glad during the pandemic, we could still be here in community together and show films. And so on the second Saturday of the month, we do a revolutionary film or a film about imperialism or socialism. So it's a really great space to be together. And my name is Monica. I'm a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And this is my comrade, Rashad, also part of AAPRP. So we're so excited that you've joined us on this Saturday. As you've seen, we are going to be showing an interview with Elizabeth Sibeko about the apartheid that was happening in South Africa. And just full disclaimer, there's a lot of heavy information about the suffering of children, even as early as the age of 7 years old, about the imprisonment and treatment of our people, the suffering under the apartheid by white supremacy, as well as like fighting for liberation. So we're so excited that you've joined us, because right after we show the film, we'll be doing a discussion. So stay tuned to ask questions, to be part of the discussion. Rashad, you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered it pretty well, but I just want to say good what's up to everyone. And yeah, I hope you guys are doing good, and I hope, we can watch this. And it is heavy, like Monica said, but yeah, we'll talk about it afterwards.
All right. Thank you again all for joining us. Let's get this. Let's see. Bear with me as I'm new to doing this. I'm going to build it up here, and we're going to start the film. Thank you all so much.
My name is Elizabeth Sibeko. I am the Pan-African Congress Women and Labor Coordinator in the United States, and I'm based at the Observer Mission of the PAC to the United Nations. We are on a fundraising tour, which started in September this year. It started in Houston. The mission of the nature of the fundraising tour is to raise funds for the refugee children who are leaving South Africa in their hundreds. The mothers are pushing those out that have survived the murder of the racist regime. As all of you have seen in the television screens before the blackout of the news, you saw the children battling the police, the youngest being about 7 years old. And just 2 months ago, again, we saw the trucks, the police trucks full of kids, and they were taken to court to be charged. And so these are the children that are being sent out of South Africa by their parents to the neighboring states. Now, the frontline states the neighboring states constitute Swaziland, Lesotho, Mozambique, Botswana, and Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And this is where the mothers push their children to safety. And these children are frightened children who do not know anybody on the other side, outside South Africa. And so we in the liberation movements receive them and take them. The PAC has been designated a place by Tanzania, that is acres and acres of land in Tanzania, to grow food for ourselves as a self-reliant spirit, and also to provide shelter and to have a little clinic for medical facilities, because Tanzania is a mosquito-infested area and it has malaria, which is a killer. And so these children will be then airlifted from the funds that we're trying to raise to charter planes to airlift them and taking them away from South Africa, from the neighboring states, because South Africa actually violates the the integrity of the African states by invading them and following the refugees from South Africa and thereby killing them or kidnapping them back into South Africa. A recent attack on the refugees was in June this year in Botswana, where South Africa, the South African military personnel drove into Botswana and they surrounded all the houses of the refugees and they machine gunned them in their sleep and put the fire on the houses of the refugees, which means that they violated Botswana and they killed all those people. So we are trying to leave these children as soon as possible into further inland, into Tanzania, where we have got acres of land. It does not mean that South Africa cannot attack Tanzania, but South Africa will have to explain how it had to jump all those countries that I've mentioned before in order to follow the refugees into Tanzania, which is further inland. And so our appeal is for assistance and contribution, monetary contribution, because in order to charter these planes, you have to have money upfront to get these children in further inland. And also our second appeal is for material aid. We're appealing for clothing because these children, when they leave, when you have to run out of South Africa, you don't have to take your suitcase because you're suspicious and because there's a state of war and the children are out. Some of them have bullet wounds, pellets in their bodies. They run out of South Africa and these children have to be taken to hospital in these neighboring states. In 1976, we had quite a number of children who came out with bullet wounds from the uprising of the students against the racist regime. And we had to ask some of the independent African states to perform surgery to remove the bullets. And we are also inheriting the same thing, even worse at this time, because the kids are out there and fighting the police. And so they're coming with these medical problems. And so we need also medicines that will help us with our building of the clinic and the medical facilities that we need. And we need clothing, the clothing that we are asking for at this moment. We are appealing for jeans and sneakers. And we're appealing also for warm-up suits, that is the jogging suits for both men and women. And we're appealing for underwear. And specifically, we are appealing for jeans because jeans can be used by both men and women. They are a unisex garment, and also they are durable. They can be worn for a very long time in the type of conditions that the refugees find themselves. And so these are some of the appeals that we are making. But lastly, the message that came with our tour was to tell the people that you have seen in the television screens and you have seen people who purport to speak for us, that the message of our people struggling is not for civil rights, nor is it for reforms, but it is for what I said earlier, for self-determination and national liberation. And this is what we're bringing with us. And we'll be here up to the end of this month, but we are coming back for the Black History Month in February. When the kids come out of South Africa, remember they're already traumatized from inside and they go into the strange lands, which is beyond South Africa, and they know nobody. They are frightened, and of course we are there to pick them up. And this is the nature of the tour, to try and raise this fund. And we take them further inland into Tanzania. But there are problems in reaching the land that we have been given. The road that leads from the capital, that is Dar es Salaam, into Ruvu, where we have the acres and acres of beautiful land to raise food. In order to get into that land, get into the land, we have to go through this road, which is very inaccessible. We've had people trying to help us because they say that it has to be, it's a special road that needs a special building, and they call it an all-weather road. And during the times when it rains, nobody can be on that road using any amount of, or any type of truck or vehicle, try and reach the people in there, so that you will find that many people have nearly lost their lives because the cars overturn. And so in the middle of the road, I myself was there trying this year to go there. In the middle of the road, we had to stop, and the tractor, we have only one tractor. The tractor had to meet us and pull us through in order to get to the place where we are. And then, of course, you find the buildings which are where the accommodation is not very of a good nature. And you find that we don't have window panes, which means that they had boarded up the windows with planks and aluminium. And there were a couple of people who were sick inside. Already I've said that, Tanzania is infested with mosquitoes, which means that it's a malaria area. And so that even the fresh air in those shelters that we have are not enough. Then again, the kids that will have to come in there, they'll have to be rehabilitated. And then, of course, arrangements have to be made to take them to school, because remember, they're just 7-year-olds and they can do nothing but to go back to school. And so we are looking forward also for those who are sympathetic and those who can suggest scholarships that can cater for the kids to take them to boarding school in and around Tanzania or other African states who are prepared to have them in the boarding schools, and to bring their educational standard up to college standard as they grow. Then we have also the water system there. Since it is just tracts of land that we have been given, they have to go and fetch water in some of those. They are not boreholes, but these are open, sort of like little lakes which are open, and then we get our water. And of course, the water is infested with parasites, and many of the people, the refugees that are in the center, and we are talking now of hundreds of people, and you can and then we have also the facilities to cook. They cook outside in those big pots. They have to make fire on the floor, and that is also another hazard, because it rains, and it means that they wait for this 1 meal a day. And if the rains are heavy, it means that the rains come and put out the fire, and so they have to remake the fire again. So we need people who will contribute to have us get the big cookers, that is the stoves that they can have with all the facilities. I mean, that will be part of the funds that will go to. And lastly, we need a generator, that is electrical generator, which is very, very important, because there are many things that they have to use which are used by electricity, and they do not have a generator. And the whole center is in darkness. We have to use candles and use some of the lanterns. But if we have a generator to generate the electricity for something like 24 hours, because some people become sick at night and you cannot see. We cannot even work in the darkness. And so these are some of the pressing things that are needed in the refugee center. And we will need them more so now that we have the young kids, and they have to be rehabilitated, and they have to have that presence of people around them. And so these are some of the projects that we are bringing to people who want to help us in the struggle. And of course, the struggle inside continues, which means that there is another depression of the mothers who have sent these children out. If you send your 7-year-old or 8-year-old, you do not know who has received the child on the other side, because the parents, this is done in secrecy. They cannot follow the children. And so again, you have another burden inside of depressed mothers who do not even know where to write to, where the children are, and we cannot communicate with them, because the minute you communicate, they are arrested, and God knows what happens when they go to prison. And because, all this is regarded by the racist regime as terrorism. And yet the terror comes from the state, because it is the state that is killing the people. But our situation is such that the parents suffer from, internally, because they don't know. And the children suffer, and so they have to be rehabilitated and be brought together. And so we still need to get them facilities to ease their minds. And so we appeal also for books, especially science books, computer books that they can use, and whilst they are waiting to be taken to the schools.
Okay, let's stop and set up a good shot just for the ending.
All right.
And maybe what was that part we had where you have we're struggling to create this area in Tanzania in the midst of blah blah blah, and if you'd like to help.
Yes.
that's
Okay.
something
All
that
right.
you feel comfortable saying if you.
Okay.
Okay. Anytime you're ready. Yeah.
I am.
Okay. Here they are waiting with their.
Yeah. So we are struggling to make a living for these children whilst they are in the refugee camps, which is not much, because we have no choice. And we are now appealing to those who are willing to contribute and help us in the refugee camps to see to the needs of the many refugees that will find their way in the center and that are already there right now. And the address to send the contributions would be our observer mission to the UN office in New York. And you can just write to the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania Observer Mission to the United Nations, 211 East 43rd Street, Suite 703, New York, 10017. And the telephone number would be area code 212-986-7378. And we will really appreciate your contributions, which will contribute a lot to these frightened kids, and most of them have pellets on their bodies, so that we can even send them to better hospitals for surgery to be performed, and also to rehabilitate them as they come in this land that they do not even know any people. We have a lot of work. The duty that we have on our shoulders is very, very enormous. Whilst the organization says, okay, we men and women are equal, they don't mean that they'll have to drag women and say that now because you're equal you have to come and participate. We have to, as women, be out there. Since the organization has a policy on that, we have to inform ourselves. We have to start discussing. We have to read, because in the PAC it's an offense actually against the organization if you do not read to inform yourself of what is happening, and read books that pertain to other struggles and also the world as a whole. And so that women have to come to the fore. They have to read the newspapers, listen to the radio, be able to discuss at the same level with the male comrades, so that we do not just sit back and have them discuss and analyze situations as if we are not there, and stop talking shop, because at times we are our own enemies. We try and say that, well, we will simply listen and not contribute. But I'm glad to say that in the PAC we've had a seminar that took place about 4 or 5 years ago, and that was to strengthen the women. And they have their own projects, and in these projects they speak out and what the needs are. And I also want to explain that the fact that we have a women's wing in the PAC does not mean that it's an entity outside the party. It is part of it. And it doesn't mean that women are a particular concern. It means that women have got those peculiar needs. For instance, they have babies. Many of them have got kids. And they have to address themselves. We have to address ourselves that when they have to go to school, to further their education, what will happen to the kids? And this is part of the party program, but that how will they adjust, and that, you know, the kids will have to be taken care of because they are actually children of the revolution. They grow up, and so that they themselves will have to participate like their mothers and participate in the overall struggle, so that we have those needs. And also women have, for instance, we're trying to set up a women's research center. Well, the treatment is very atrocious in the sense that when you are a political prisoner and you go into the prison cells, you know that you are going to get worse than a criminal. You are, because you are threatening the state. And so you find people, women I've talked to, who had been made to stand on ice blocks, and you know that a piece of ice, even if you take it out of the refrigerator, you can't keep it for long in your hand. But if you are made to stand on ice blocks on both your feet, and then you are hung up, your hands are tied up to the ceiling, and you have these people scourging you with a whip to get the information out of you. And this friend of mine was telling me that she was made to stand on the ice block until she fainted because she became numbed. And then when she fainted, she found that she was being jerked back because she couldn't stand, and she was just, then when the time came for her, which was really disgusting and so humiliating, when the time for her came to have him periods, what the jailers did was, the white jailer did, they took a can, and this is the true story, they took a can, an empty can, and a little tin, and they brought it and they collected the menstrual blood from her, because, you know, you're not given anything, no sanitary towels. And then they took it to the cells of her male comrades who were arrested with her during when they swooped down on the black consciousness. And they showed this to the male comrades, say that, look at your friend, this is what she's suffering, she doesn't have this and that, and she has already talked, so you guys better talk. You know, this is the type of harassment. But that's nothing. There are other people whose nails have been removed from their fingers, and that's the most painful thing, in order to get information. And women have been humiliated where their private parts have been searched, and I don't know what they want to see in the private parts, but those are the humiliation of women that they've undergone. But I had an experience when my husband was in prison, when he was detained, and I had to take him food before he was sentenced. And one of the things that happened in prison, that you stand in a line, and then we had to dish out the food from the container that I had, which was just one plate that I brought. But in prison, there were these small little bowls, and for one plate would take about 6 of these bowls. And the white guard started asking, whose food is this? And the one plate was put in 6 bowls. And when he got to number 3, the 3 other bowls, he just put his boot, that is food, inside the food on this, and just crushed and kicked everything away. So it shows this type of fascist mentality that, you know, they didn't care whether the food is full of sand, and then they would throw this other food away. And then, of course, I was warned that if I do again, I will be in trouble. Then, just in terms of communicating with my husband, there's the glass panes, and there's a security police behind him, there's a security police behind me, and we were many of us, and we had to speak simultaneously, and there was this noise, you couldn't even hear what you were saying. And if they suspected that you were passing a code or a message, then you were abruptly disrupted, and he was taken into the cells, and then you were told to leave the prison precinct. And that was my experience that I had. And another time I went there, and I waited for an hour And I kept on waiting for the name to be called, because when you come in, you give them the name. And they didn't. And when I asked one of them, he was so angry. And he said, when I said, who are you looking for? I said, David Sibeko. And he said, don't tell us about that name. He is in the spared diet, which means that they had punished him. He was not going to get food for a number of days. And you can imagine what it meant for me. I had to go back to the ghettos all the way from because the prisons are in the city. And just imagine that how many days if he is going to be able to pull through. But this is part of the sacrifice that our people have to go through. And others, it's worse, they were beaten up. And if you fight back or you resist, then you're found hanged in the cell. So like you saw with Steve Biko, they knocked him all over. His head was like cotton wool, and they beat him up. And many others who find hanged. And for instance, that white trade unionist, Dr. Neil Eggert. I mean, a person who's just 21 years or 22 years of age, why would he take his own life when he was actually struggling against a regime? Which means that they hanged him themselves. And so these are the atrocities inside the prison. But it's worse for the Africans, worse for the Africans than any other group, national group. The homeless, as I said, that it's they are designated to appease the world that, well, we have been here for 300 years, the whites that dominate us, and so we are living side by side with the blacks, but we know what is good for the blacks. We are going to give them these dry, barren homelands so that they can have some sort of independence. And of course, we are glad that the world has rejected that. As a shame, it has been rejected. Even this country, who's always on the side of South Africa, when they voted against the homeland policy, she also voted, so we know that they have been condemned. And so these are actually reservations where the soil cannot bring out anything, you cannot grow anything, it is called food. The racist regime itself in South Africa had sent soil experts some time ago to go and look at the soil in these homelands, and they found that the soil was condemned. Themselves came out with that, but still our people are uprooted. Now, when people say that there are millions, we have about 12 millions or 12 plus millions of our people in these black Bandustans, people will say that, well, maybe they like to go there, as if, I'm going to Iowa or I'm going to Indiana, let's go there. It's not like that. These people are whole families that are uprooted by force by the racist regime, which means that the places that they live in are designated now to be occupied by whites or for development, and they are uprooted by force, which means that they just come and they give you a warning of maybe a month, and if you have not moved, they come with the bulldozers and they bulldoze your house down, and then you are only left with those little belongings, which means your pots, your pans, the bed linen, and you have your children, and that's all that you can take with you, because the government sent trucks to remove you, and then you are taken according to the past, what the past designates you to be, as in a tribal affiliation or ethnicity. And then they look at your past, okay, this one is Venda, this one is Zulu, so the trucks drive you to this barren Bantustan, and they just drop you next to the road where you do not know anybody, and they just drop you, especially women and children, and that you have to find a place where you're going to get shelter for the night with your children, with your belongings, and they don't care. You have no compensation. They don't give you anything. You're just taken just like that, and so you find that people are there, very bitter and very painful things happen. Many of them lose their lives. The children die because of exposure, because again now the malnutrition that is earnest in there. They join those people who are sitting there under genocide conditions, where you find that the highest standard, that out of every 1,000 live births amongst blacks, 90 children die from the age of 1. They don't even reach 2. And out of every 1,000 live births amongst whites, only 30 die. So you can see the discrepancy. And you find that the health facilities in these homelands are far away from the residents of the people. And you find that each homeland maybe has got one, and hundreds and thousands upon thousands of people go to this one health facility, and you find that 1 or 2 doctors are overworked, and 4 nurses cater for over 6,000 people. And so if you are lucky to reach there and your child sees a doctor after 3 days or 72 hours, you are lucky your child is attended. But other people, the children die when they are in the line trying to see the doctor. And so you can see how our people, they are put there to die slowly. And you find women that they are the ones, because the husbands are away under contracts to work in the mines, and they come only once a year. That's 11 months they're away. Find that the women are the ones who take care of the sick children, and when the children die, like every day there are several funerals, and the women they are the ones who have to bury the children, and they are the ones who actually use when the coffin goes into the ground. You see, we don't use the machinery that is used here, like to cover the graves. We do it ourselves. It's traditional because we feel that we have to do it. And so you find women with shovels covering the graves. They are the men of the homeland. They are also the wives of the homeland. And then back in the urban areas, under the influx control laws, there is a section called Section 10 of the urban areas, which means that you have to reside in one area for 10 years straight without breaking your residence, and you have to be employed by one employer for 15 years. And if you dare break any of these, then you forfeit your residence in the area. And so with women, again, they are the victims, black women. You find that they have to break the time limit, the time spent with their employers, because they have to go and bear children. And so by the time they go back, because the blacks are usually domestic workers, at home, the black women, and when they go back to their employers, they find that since this is the most exploiting job, you find that they have already got somebody. If you can afford to give somebody $30 a month, then you can have so many servants. And so the job market there is poor in terms of selling your labor, because everybody is an unskilled labor, and so many people are looking for jobs. And you find that your employer says, "I'm sorry, you have been away." They don't care whether this was, you had to go and bear a child. And then, of course, you are told that, and then she endorses your pass, which means that you are no longer employed. And then you are a potential, prisoner, because once you step out of the premises, you might meet the police who was looking for people with past offenses, and then you are arrested summarily, and you are not known where you are. They put you in prison, being a woman, and your children probably are there at home alone. Your husband is at work. And when you get back home, you find that the following day, after you have been removed from your employer's list, the government, the local administration come to your home, and they literally bundle you out and say that, look, according to the laws, the influx control laws of residents in Soweto, that is the surrounding urban areas, you can no longer reside here. So you have to take your children who are already in the schools there, and you have to take them away without notice, without anything. And you can see the trauma of the children being removed, and you are being taken by the truck, given 2 days to put your belongings together. Being a family, you have a husband, but because the wife has broken that time span, and then you're uprooted with the kids, screaming kids, and there's so misery in the home, and you're put into the government trucks, and they're driven to be dumped outside your homeland, which is designated in your passport. And then back in your home, it is no longer a family, because now the wife has been removed. So the husband is told, look, you have to evacuate this home, this premise, because you don't constitute a family anymore. And then the husband is taken to what is called single-sex hostels, where they live. There is curfew, 7 to 7. After 7 o'clock, they cannot be out of the hostel. And these hostels are surrounded by electric wire, and they have guards that have got that are carrying guns, to see if anybody escapes, or and you cannot bring your family, you cannot bring your children. And if they do get permission to come and see you, which is very rare, they are only allowed to be in the city for 72 hours, which means that they can go and ask for accommodation in Soweto, in the Black Ghetto, because nobody stays they cannot be accommodated in the hostels. And it's very rare that the children, because they don't have money in the first place, so that the men also are having this problem, the pain of being separated from the children and their wives, and they do not know what is happening back in the ghettos. And so you see the splitting up of families and the resistance and pain that it brings with it. And so when people speak of Bantustan, all those people have been forced to go and live there. And you find that in the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape, the women, because the way the children were dying every day, and they knew that their husbands were in Cape Town, so they decided to come together as a block of women to help each other with, well, how much do we have? $1? Okay, you have $3, and they brought together and they hired trucks to take them to Cape Town. And then they just come out, then they got outside the town of Cape Town, and they were dropped there. And then they all of a sudden there was a squatter camp by the women and children. And as soon as the racist government police found out, they came and went very violently to break up the Crossroads squatter camp, which they set up. And you find women battling the police and the bulldozers coming to break down the shackles that they had as accommodation, which means that they just had plastics on top, and then they had 4 poles just to make a shelter. And the children were sick because they were exposed to the cold of the weather there, and the children were suffering from flu. Many of them died there. It was just an open, and that for the first time the world focused on that. And we saw it on the media. We saw this in the front page of the New York Times, saying that the South African regime was victimizing women and children, and actually their pictures came out. And this was the squatter camp that they had put against the forceful removal to the homelands. And in the squatter camps, so the women constituted themselves into communities, and they had their own spokespeople, and they were always so threatened, and many of them went to prison. But they had these layers. When others go to prison as leaders, there are others who are taking their place, which means that the struggle in earnest was going on. And then the world was focusing on those squatter camps, where they said that the government must do something. They cannot kill, because women were killed there and children were. They're set upon by big dogs. And if you have seen the movie Rising Tide on South Africa Belongs to Us, there you can see the Crossroads women speaking out, and you see actually the struggle that went on there in the what you call the uprooting of the squatter camps. I mean, the worst type of slums. That is where people just put up the squatter camp, no facilities for restrooms and nothing, but they were struggling to be near their husbands to keep their families together. And so really people should understand that in the homeland it's not a choice. It is the uprooting of people and forced into reservations where they are dying slowly, which means that it is a genocide. Whilst they kill, whilst they use physical force in the ghettos by shooting and killing the black people in the urban areas and shooting and killing children, they are also perpetuating a form of genocide in the rural areas, in the homelands, because that's where people are dumped and they cannot eke out any living. I mean, they live on cornmeal, that is cornmeal which we cook, and then water and no milk, because there's no facilities for milk, and they are not allowed to raise any animals. And even if you raise animals, there is no grass because the soil is soil erosion. So a whole nation is being killed under genocide methods, and the world doesn't know this. All the homelands are designed to be concentration camps where people are dying slowly, so that the government must say that, well, we didn't shoot them, but they chose to go
and stay there. And I yet have to see anybody who says that he voluntarily or she voluntarily wants to go and stay in concentration camps and die there. Well, I will speak for the PAC as a liberation movement. First and foremost, I must say that we have internationally, we are recognized by the Organization of African Unity. And then we're also recognized by the United Nations, hence we have the observer status, which means that we participate in all the deliberations of the United Nations, except with the benefit of voting, and which means that internationally, the international community has recognized us as the true spokespeople for our people who are oppressed. Now, the role that the liberation movements are playing inside South Africa, when PAC was born, it came out of the African National Congress, the ANC, and it was the youth league of the African National Congress that was called the Africanists within the ANC that came out actually with a program of action of 1949, which was adopted by the whole Congress, that is the ANC itself adopted the program of action in 1949, December. And one of the objectives of the program of action was that the mandate says that we have to fight for self-determination and national liberation, which means that self-determination is actually an inalienable right of all nations to choose their type of government in their own country. It is not a right that you are given by people, but it is a natural right which is enshrined in the documents of the United Nations, which means the Charter of the United Nations. And so if all nations can have the right to exercise this right to choose their own government in their own country, we as people, also as humanity, we have a right to. And so the PAC addressed itself to that. And of course, to liberate our country, since you know it's so rich, and we have the gold, the diamond, and we have the strategic minerals, which the whole world is focusing on. It won't just be a changing of hands on saying that, well, we know that we colonized you in 1652, and so now our Christian hearts say that we were wrong, take your land back with all the resources. We know that blood has already been spilled for this, and that our people have been dispossessed and oppressed and humiliated and dehumanized and exploited ruthlessly for the resources in our country. And so the liberation movements address themselves to the national mandate, which is liberating the whole country. Looking at it on both sides, if you look at it in terms of the Western democracy type of government, of parliamentary democracy, and you look at it in terms of the Eastern type of democracy, we are in the majority. We are 29 million of us. Whittle, you add, you subtract, you multiply, you divide. We still are in the majority. And the dominant force, in the invading force that came in 1652 in the form of white people in South Africa, 4.5 million. I mean, even if you ask a kid and ask, how come that 4.5 million are in 87% of the most fertile land and 29 million are in 13% of the land, and ask a child, and you can draw little boxes and say, well, this box is so big, can it go into the 13%? And then this box is so small, can it go into the 87%? And the child will actually change the smaller and bring it to the 13% and take the larger 29 and put it in the 87%. So that is how the land robbery came about in the subjugation of our people. And that is where the struggle has always been there. The African people have always struggled also so that they could rule themselves in their own country like all other nations. And we say to people who are supporting our struggle, who are anti-imperialists, who are anti-colonialists, who are anti-apartheid, which is a form of colonialism because we were invaded in 1652. We say that if they are anti-oppression, the anti-dispossession of people's lands, and they support the United Nations Charter, which governs all nations. We say then that they have to support our stand, because we are also we are also under we are as a nation supposed to be respected by the Charter of the United Nations. So we yet have to exercise the right of self-determination in our country. And that is why the PAC says that we are looking towards a non-racial Azania, which means that the color of the man's or woman's skin will matter less in a new Azania. And that is why we talk of one race, the human race, from which we all belong. Because we feel that if we are bringing into the new Azania multiracialism, which means all these nationalities were still looking at them exclusively, and that, if you look at them exclusively, it means that we have to cater to them, to their needs, which are exclusive to everybody else. We are bringing again into Azania another type of apartheid, a multiplied, which is probably what the term connotes, to say that it's apartheid multiplied, multiracialism. And so on those, on those 2 points, that is self-determination and the race question, we are very clear that we want an Azania which is non-racial, where the only loyalty, the person that will be accepted as an Azanian is the one that will accept the democratic rule of the black majority and will have his only loyalty to Africa. That person will be called an African. And so there it is. Because we're not going to look at groups, we're looking at individuals. What do you want to do? You want to participate in Azania and be an Azanian and help to develop the country. Well, the level of struggle really, it is a distinctive, it is a very peculiar type of struggle where you find the kids, and the youngest is now about 7 years old, and the very youngest that has been killed by the police was a 1-month baby who was killed. And I'm sure many others are killed because the mothers are constantly carrying them on their backs, and when the police fire, so many of them who have not reached the headlines. So that you find that in the struggling, the children that are struggling are the youngest, as I say, is 7 years old. They are the ones who are battling the police. We saw in 1976, for the first time, the kids coming out against the education system as rallying around that issue as part of the liberation struggle, which is enshrined actually in the 1949 program of action, which I told you that was adopted by the Senior Congress, and it was the document of the Youth League, the Africanists within the African National Congress. And later, when the PAC was formed, we used the 1949 program of action because it is a program that is addressing itself to the condition, to the objective of the struggle in our country. And also it is a multi-frontal program, which means that it involves the youth, the churches, the community organization, the trade unions, the liberation movement themselves, and the school children, which means that it is a multi-frontal in that way. And that is why you see our people always rally around an issue. The students in 1976, they rallied around the Afrikaans language, which they didn't want to be used as a medium of instruction. And you find again that the trade unions were rallying around, the betterment of pay in their jobs, and also in the conditions and the bargaining of the trade unions. That is part of the multi-frontal of the program of action. And then today you find that the people are rallying around the rents, paying of rents. That is not an isolated thing. It's part of the systematic unfolding program of action.
But under these repressive conditions, what do people actually use to fight back? And that's the amazing thing to try and picture.
Okay, we were still talking about the kids, that they are out there fighting. Now, the children, as you see them on TV, they're fighting, they're using bottles and stones and whatever they get at their disposal. And even the parents, of course, they are part of the struggle. That is why we look at it as a people's war. But then the secrecy of South Africa, I mean, the declaration of the state of emergency meant that they were no longer fighting with bottles and stones, that some firepower was also coming from the other side. And because South Africa cannot explain to the world why the state of emergency, to control the people. And after that, the state of emergency, which was declared on the 20th of July this year, you find that they go to Cape Town, and Cape Town is already, I mean, the police are all over around Cape Town, all over and around Cape Town, and they declare another state of emergency in a city. Like, for instance, they would declare in San Francisco and say that the whole of San Francisco is under the state of emergency. That's ridiculous, because it's already a police state. They've already declared a general state of emergency. And so again, we examine what is actually coming out of Cape Town. It means that there's firepower on the other side. And then just a few weeks ago, there was the blackout, the news blackout, where they even threatened and even injured some of the international foreign journalists in South Africa, which means that South Africa is the repression and actually the atrocities, mutilation of bodies are now can no longer reach the television screens. And also this has been geared to dampen the spirit of supporting the struggle of the oppressed inside by the American people and by many other countries, where the nationals of those countries are rising up and saying to their governments, do something about the situation in South Africa. But also it means that the South African government itself, its hands are full. They do not know what to do because of the resistance that is inside. And our people, like I say, that in terms of loss of lives, it can never be bought by any amount of money, billions, trillions that can be offered. It can never. Our people are going for the whole thing that is for self-determination and national liberation, which is what everybody is enjoying in the world today. And in South Africa, the liberation of the black person, the black man, will mean the liberation of the whites who are oppressing us, because they are the worst oppressed. Every time they walk, there is fear, especially at this time, where each home has an arsenal of weapons to defend itself. And it's a very tragic state of affairs, because whilst every white home is an arsenal of weapons to defend itself against the black invasion, which they imagine black people will simply come into the suburbs and kill them, they have black servants. It is really a contradictory state of affairs, because you find that whilst they've armed themselves like that, they have a black nanny who looks after the children, they have a black cook, they have a cleaner woman who's black, they have a washer woman who's black, and they have a garden boy who is an adult, actually is addressed as a garden boy. So it means that they have all these 5 black people working for each and every home in South Africa. Now, how sure are they that the children who are being killed in the ghettos, the children who are battling the police, are not children of these very same people? You see, now they are in constant fear, because I am sure they discuss these things and say that, what do? We are trapped in this situation. We have to have the servants coming to work for us, but also our own government, which we elect as whites in South Africa, are killing the children of these very same people. And so we're in danger, and so they're in that dilemma, and they have to sleep with guns under their pillows. And we say that the freedom of the African who is in the majority, who is in his country, and who is indigenous to that land, the freedom of the African majority to bring a democratic type of government in Azania will be the freedom of the white person, because for the first time, the white people are going to throw away their guns, except, just to license them to those. Probably it will be part of the laws of the new state to say that those who want guns to protect themselves like any other home. But the guns, those rifles, those automatic rifles, which we see in the film, The Rising Tide, it shows them, the whites in South Africa, going into the shooting clubs to perfect their target shooting, because this is going to be directed to the black people. They will, for the first time, throw away those guns, and everybody will be, for the first time, say, I am resting now, my life is no longer threatened, and we'll be looking forward to develop the country as it's supposed to be. As you know, that South Africa is a very rich country. And so that is why you say in the piece, you will look towards a non-racial society, where when those guns have been thrown away, and that fear, and people address themselves as individuals, accepting the rule, the democratic rule of the black majority, and calling themselves having one loyalty to Africa, not people who are going to have dual citizenship, one loyalty to Africa, they will be called Africans and are welcome in that society which we are going to build. But before then, the story is a bad one, because right now, blood is flowing, and it's flowing on one side, and there is tremendous struggle. But we know that finally, the African people are going to get their land back, and everybody who wants to self-determination to be practiced and exercised will be part of that nation in Azania. I was explaining the extent to which the pass laws and the passes can be detrimental to black people inside Azania, and I was saying that in the late 1950s there was all of a sudden the police were arresting people for the passes in the Transvaal so much that many people were arrested for these pass offenses, for failing to produce the pass on demand. And the families didn't know which prisons these people were sent to, because an offense would probably fetch about 3 months if you fail to produce a pass. But when the 3 months when the time went beyond 3 months, then the relatives started going to the police stations and saying that, look, we are missing our relatives who were arrested at such and such a date, and the 3 months has gone beyond, and that we want to know where they are. And of course they were given a running around, because that's what happens in South Africa, especially if you go there without a lawyer. They will give you a running around. You don't know where your relatives are. And then there was a rumor after that, because all of a sudden we saw these potatoes, these big potatoes. For instance, here you can say they're the Idaho potatoes, which are the biggest potatoes so far that I know in the United States. And these big potatoes were being sold for a bag of potatoes, which would be, sold for $2 or $1.50, an equivalent of $1.50. Now people were buying these potatoes, they were all over. And they came from a little town called Bethal in the Transvaal. And then after that, there was a rumor that these potatoes were actually being grown through the fertilizers that came from the prisoners who disappeared, were arrested for past offenses. And then there was this running off, all over. We started saying that we have to boycott these potatoes. And then a journalist, a black journalist, pretended he had no pass. And so you see, they don't care whether you're a journalist or what. If you are black, they'll ask for a pass. And when he failed to produce his pass, he was arrested and he was sent to this farm. Because the farmers, what happened is that all the farmers needed labor. And so they were actually getting prisoners from the prisons and into their farms, these big farms of potatoes, and they were just giving the prisons maybe very little money to compensate for the prisoners they are taking. And so the people were brutally misused on the farm labor in the potato fields, and they were killed. Many of them were killed with the pick handles. They were shot, some of them, and the other prisoners were led to bury them in the potato fields. And so when this journalist went there, he was actually sold in one of the farms, and he literally found out that was truth, that the people had disappeared and were buried right in the potato fields. And so they started digging, the prisoners themselves started digging, and they came out with skeletons and skulls. And so this went out, and it was blown sky high. And for the first time, the world now found out that South Africa was doing that. And those farmers were charged. But of course, once you are white in South Africa, everything is hush-hush. And the prisons were also charged, and found that many people disappeared and died. In the meantime, we were eating these potatoes, which were actually fertilized with the skeletons, that is the bodies of our people. And so this I wanted to just drawing the attention how the viciousness of this fascist regime, which is in South Africa. Remember, at the end of the World War, Foster, who's the former prime minister who has just passed away, was actually detained during the Second World War because he was a sympathizer with Hitler. And so that when the Allied forces were fighting, they were literally not wanting to fight because they were sympathizing with Hitler. So that the apartheid regime actually has neo-Nazis there who are sympathizers who sympathize with the Hitlerite regime. And so this is the viciousness of the regime that we have to we are facing. And these were part. I was just trying to illustrate that the past can actually land you to your death in South Africa, because you are not sure that if I've forgotten my past at home and I couldn't produce it, I will simply be charged and then will be told that you must come back tomorrow. There's nothing like that. You go in, and God knows whether your family will ever find out where you are. And people have died for just failing to produce the past.
Welcome back. Thank you all so much for being here in community with us. And we just got an opportunity to watch. That's my fault, y'all. I'm always learning technology. The video right after that was playing on YouTube. Thank you for your patience with my technology skills. And so that was an interview with Elizabeth Sibeko, who organized against the white supremacist, racist apartheid in South Africa, which is known as Azania. She was a member of the Pan-African Congress as well as the labor coordinator. So thank you all so much again for joining us. And Rashad, wanting to turn it over to you, what are some of your thoughts after watching that film together?
I don't know. Some of my initial thoughts were just like the parallels between not only what was going on, in apartheid, Azania, and with the apartheid regime out there, but also, how it related to sort of like the Jim Crow South in America in the early 1900s, but also obviously with Palestine and what they face with the Zionist regime in so-called Israel, and then also the parallels with the indigenous movement here in America and stuff like that, and just how the fight for land is like one of the most crucial elements of the whole struggle, besides the cultural element and stuff like that. But that fight for land and how it was taken in Palestine, South Africa, and from the indigenous people here, it's just they're just so similar in the way they did it. It's just I don't know. It just kind of not like blows my mind, but at the same time, it's just they use the same exact tricks. And so like, yeah, I like the way she broke it down and everything, and just like almost like sort of like the everyday issues that our people were facing out there, and just how it relates to the whole system of colonialism and stuff like that, and how it mimics itself across borders. And so yeah, I think that's what really hit me while watching it.
Thank you so much for sharing that, like the parallels that are happening around colonialism and stolen land, and like how genocide is used in all those spaces, right? And Azania and Palestine and on Turtle Island in this country, and like the parallels that happen around like stolen land, capitalism, labor, and all the unknowns that we have to find out and discover ourselves about what happens, because we're always taught only one side of history. And so, so much appreciation to Ancestor Elizabeth, Sibeko, and others who continue to fight for the liberation of Azania. And there's still elements, right, of the apartheid even now that impact Azania and our people there. I'm not on YouTube, so I can't see the comments. So if there's any comments, I'm gonna lean toward you to do that, because I might mess up some technology if I try to go log back on. You know, this was a hard, I mean, anytime I watch these things, they're really hard for me, because our people suffer so much. They suffer no matter where they are. And just like just feeling and reflecting on like women, mothers having to send their children as early as 7 years old who've been brutalized through gunfire and not knowing if their child ever even made it, right? And just hoping and having faith that they've made it to one of these, which Elizabeth Sibeko described as like a refugee camp, and hoping that the children made it there, and wanting to have them like, and they created that community care, and there could be no communication, right? Because the fear of communication would be death, would be the imprisonment, would be the continuous torture, and just the continued courage our people had organizing to fight the regime and the brutality that they faced in all aspects like of it. And so like for me, it was just like, damn, our people suffer so much and it still hasn't ended, you know, because these elements still exist wherever our people are. And so for me, I was just like thinking about that and like the traumatization, like thinking about the children being traumatized, and like she used the word rehabilitation, right? Like helping them heal. How do you help them heal? How do you provide resources and services to them as they're harm and they're hurting? And so I was just reflecting on that and much more. This is my second time watching this film. And so I was just reflecting on just the heaviness and pain that accompanied our people, whether you were imprisoned, whether you were fleeing, whether you were also organizing for our self-determination and liberation, just the pain as well as determination.
Yeah, definitely. Because, you know, and then, you know, it's like what you said, you know, it's all goes into me, you know, what you were talking about with the kids and stuff like that, and the trauma that they had to go through, and, you know, having to rehabilitate them. But all that stuff that, like, including that and the stuff that she was talking about, you know, the genocide, those are like slow death measures. And so the destruction of families and separating families, stealing people's homes and forcing them out their homes. It was just crazy to hear all the ways all the like the barricades they put into place to just to strip people and to, like she said, like dehumanize people and humiliate them, and to ultimately make sure that they die off in a manner that can make them seem, that can make the apartheid regime seem, I don't know, maybe not less bad, because, you know, like what she said, she was like, at least we didn't shoot them. And, you know, obviously we know that they were shot and they were tortured and stuff like that. But the slow death measures that the colonial and the imperialist regimes that they place on colonized people, it's just it's insane. And I think they do it now in that way, the slow death measures, because it allows them to skate by, and to allows them to, like, for business to also go on as normal, and where the international pressure isn't as hard. And so, but for us, it feels exactly the same. You know, we're still losing our people. We're still being repressed and oppressed, and we're still living in open air prisons. And it's just so, you know, for us, it feels exactly the same. Our people are still dying. It doesn't matter if it's slow, fast, it doesn't matter to us, but to them, I think, they feel like it helps them because they almost can like get away with it because it's like, oh, well, no, they died of natural causes or they hung themselves. It was suicide. The life is crazy now. Oh, they took the drugs, even though, they took the drugs. They did the drugs, even though we know that they flooded us with drugs and stuff like that. So it's those type of things that really like get under my skin. And like you said, like it hurts watching this. And so like I feel bad because like I know about the apartheid regime and stuff like that, but I honestly have not done as much research as I have. But like, because every time I hear stuff, it really fucks with me. And so like I really have been trying to avoid. I don't know why, and it sucks, but I really have been trying to avoid even going into it as much as I should because like that shit it really gets to me, and I get mad and I cry and stuff like that. So yeah.
Man, I have to learn about this as well. And here in Tiwa territory, we also have people living here from Azania. And so that makes me think about Pan-African Weekly News and seeing sometime in the future if they would like to speak about the continued fight that they do and what they do to support Azania as well. What you were making me think of when you were talking about like that slow death, right? Like the fear that they're able to instill. Again, this is like British imperialism, right? Settler colonialism. It's making me think about what Sibeko talked about like the drinking water, right? That was not even drinkable, that was filled with pesticides, right? Pesticides that can like basically kill you, right? And where people are peeing out, urinating blood, like my son got to watch it with me earlier. And we were discussing like what that does to the human body. Like we need water, we need food to survive. And that's the only options, right? And it's that like slow torture. And then you also, when you were talking about that, when you were talking about stolen land, it reminded me of, I was trying to comprehend it a little bit more. But how like you had to reside in a certain place or else they could steal your land, and like the forced labor. And I'll try to post it in the chat later, but Comrade Ajamu wrote on Hood Communists in February about the apartheid as well, and the anti-apartheid movement. And it was talking about in Azania, like the resources that were there, right? So this is happening because of there's gold there, there's steel there, there's resources, right, that are extracted and stolen from the land and profited off of, right? Exactly what you're talking about earlier about what's happening in Palestine, what's happening on Turtle Island. And we know that globally things exist because they're stolen, like in Africa. And so it just makes me think about how not only is it like their immediate death, slow death, it's like the extraction of resources to build something that's not ours, right? Build something that our people won't have access to as well. And it's all connected to like genocide. So I have a lot more to learn as well about the apartheid and anti-apartheid movement. Oh, you were
yeah, I know. That's crazy. I'm always doing that. Well, yeah, it's just that's what I think, they because even in school, like I know, like I just know they try to keep things like this. They like, I don't know, I just remember maybe hearing about, like apartheid in school, but it's just framed around Mandela and how long he was in jail. And so that's basically all you hear. And so like they never, even it was definitely never related to land and, how the fact that white people were like what she said, what was it? 4.5 million people, but they occupied 87% of the land. We see the exact same thing in Palestine right now. It's like in Palestine, they decided to force them out. But, in Azania, it's just, I don't know. That's they try and keep these things from us. And when they do feed us the little bit that we get, we don't get the whole picture because they don't want us to get the whole picture. And so, yeah, that's definitely like something I want to, I have to, study up on more. But it's crazy. She was talking about, the treatment of prisoners and the food, and it's just crazy because you get the same exact thing here with our political prisoners. And so, I know George Jackson, when he got into prison and he came under the was learning under the wing of W.L. Nolan. W.L. Nolan, they're bringing petitions to the prison courts and stuff like that, and saying that to not have feces and glass and stuff in their foods. And so it's the same, she was describing some of the same exact things that prisoners in Azania, political prisoners in Azania were going through, that the same stuff they do here. And it's funny because America, whenever we heard about it, I've seen interviews where American politicians and stuff like, oh, we can't continue to support South Africa if these stories keep coming out about how they're cheating people. And at the same time, they're doing Leonard Peltier is still in jail at the same time they're saying these things. And so, or Matula Shakur and stuff like that. At the same time they're saying these things and how they can't be supporting some other country. The racist white regime here is doing the same exact thing. So that's that, that we have a thing right now that's going on, the pan-European, coming together, the pan-European mission that we can see happening. And it's been going on for so long. We have to be clear on that, because they can say whatever they want and be like, oh, we can't support this, but they have been supporting it. They are those same exact people. Like she said, they got neo-Nazis they had neo-Nazis in the apartheid regime, and we're seeing the same exact types of things right now, where maybe it hasn't been always hidden from some of us, but some of us are now just now seeing that the fact that America loves Nazis, has always loved Nazis, and every place that white folks exist, there's going to be Nazis, and we see this. So yeah, they can say whatever they want, but their actions speak louder than their words always. So
Yeah, and when you're talking about the practices of torture, the practices of contaminating food, and the comrades appreciate Onya Sabu, is those same tactics are happening in other places because they learned them from this country, right? Onya Sabu talks about Hitler even mentioned he learned tactics from this country, right? Like America, but KKK, right? All the Ks that exist in it. Also, the German regime in the 1900s to 1905 practiced genocide against the Nama in Southwest Africa, which is now Namibia. And so again, the practices of torture, the practices of policing, right? We also know that the military industrial complex goes to Africa and also trains the police there. And so those comments are being pointed out. Also, another comment in Azania, there had covered wagons, just like the United Snakes did when they wagged genocide against the indigenous people of this land. So another example of parallels and repeating practices that cause harm and torture, and always possible learned from this country.
yeah, and in the chat, Marion Anderson, she was saying that there's no escape, because I was saying it's hard for me to learn and stuff like that. Well, hard for me to get into it because that shit's sad for me. But she was saying, or they were saying, there's no escape. You know what I mean? And so you got to cry through it, and that's so true, because I mean that's like we were just you were just saying, and we were just talking about they repeat practices and tactics and stuff like that across borders, and so it's imperative on us to learn those things and learn exactly what the fuck they were doing in Azania, what they were doing in the Congo and stuff like that, and tie it all together so it can further the struggle today. Because like we're saying, they do the same exact things, and it's like they just recycle. I don't even really know exactly.
That's the
kind
word.
of update with technology, but it's really just a recycling of everything they've done for literally maybe 400 or 500 years. So,
and that's why it's so important that we have political education, even Elizabeth Sibeko talked about this, like women's role and fighting this, like learning political education, empowering ourselves, equipping ourselves, right, to be part of the movement, to rise up, to fight back. And that's so important that we know our history, because it's been, what is the word, hidden from us for so long, right? And so in the apartheid movement, there was an anti-apartheid movement, right? In the apartheid, excuse me, there was an anti-apartheid movement where like the struggle was there, where even children, right, were fighting in that struggle. Elizabeth Sibeko talked about that as well. Women fighting about it, men fighting like in the movement. And so our people have always fought back, no matter what was happening in these imperialist, violent, genocide spaces. Our people have always fought back. And I didn't realize the apartheid was over 40 years. I did know a little bit about some of the elements that still exist, but that is a long time, a lot of suffering, right?
Yeah, and on that end point that you just said, she said, what did she say? Hold on, I wrote it down. She said that she said that no amount of money she was like, there's been too much, there's too much death. There's no amount of money, no amount of reparations can repair that shit. She was like, we're going after the whole fucking thing. We're going after self-determination and liberation of our people. And so that I felt that shit so hard. And like you were saying with the kids and stuff, I love how they worked it out there in in Azania, because what they viewed it as is a people's war, and that those children were children of the revolution, and so they all these tactics and things were passed down to where they were organized in such a way where they can do things and be proactive in their actions and have their own internal dynamism about them. And so I think that's extremely important. That's what we have to always do, and that's what successful revolutions have done throughout the time we've seen them happen. That it's a protracted process, and it has to be a multi-generational effort that goes from the grandparents to the parents to the kids and stuff like that. And so that's something that I feel like is extremely important, and something that was always going to be something we have to try and strengthen, is how we relate to our youth in our community and stuff like that, and get them to have that. But I mean, they can't get it if we don't have it. So it's we got to build that consciousness and stuff like that, to where we are being able to be organized and get all our people to view it as us against a whole system and stuff like that, and not individuals against other individuals. And so yeah, I love that she brought that up, that that it's children young as 7 throwing rocks, throwing Molotov cocktails and stuff like that, and fighting back. And we see it everywhere. In Palestine, it's unfortunate. It's extremely unfortunate. But I think just in the past 6 days, 6 children have been murdered by the Zionist regime in Palestine, and I think it's like 8 in the past 2 or 3 weeks, because I know I've seen a funeral of a couple young children like a couple weeks ago. But yeah, so like we're saying, it's extremely unfortunate, but they're a part of the movement, and they understand what the fuck is going on, and they're fighting back as well. And so they're deemed a target by these fucking crazy Zionists and racist white supremacist folks. And it happens all around. We see our kids get murdered over here in the same exact ways. And so
Yeah, they just want to live. Our kids want to live, our people want to live. So I really appreciate you elevating the multi-generational organizing together, building together, learning together, organizing together. Like, it's so critical, because it's going to, take all of us. And I think about, I didn't learn anything about Africa growing up. I learned more about like what you see on TV, right? And it wasn't described in the framework as oppression. It was described in the framework as people in Africa are in poverty. And I didn't learn till much later on in life, maybe even about 5 years ago, about that's not real at all. And then 3 years ago, when I joined AAPRP, like more in depth about why that's not real, like learning that Africa is the richest landmass, right? Like none of those things were ever shown, but I repeatedly images of children in Africa suffering. And the message was, it's Africans' fault, right? The message was not what we learned about today, right? It wasn't about learning about the apartheid, learning about the brutalization of our people in all over Africa, like never learning about those things. And so why involving children and everyone, right? Regardless of age, if you're African, learning about what's happening as well as getting involved is so critical, because settler colonialism, Europeans like benefit from our suffering, benefit from all of these things. And so folks who benefit from capitalism, who benefit for suffering, are not concerned about our liberation. They're not concerned about our oppression. They're not concerned about any of those things, but we are, because these are our people. And so that's why we must be involved in building like that consciousness. So I wish that I would have learned about a lot of these things earlier on, but I'm glad that I'm continuing to learn. And it's so much to learn. There's so much. And when you were talking about Elizabeth Sibeko's words about like for our liberation, it was reminding me about Nkrumah about talking about like the liberation of like all Africans and having like one unified socialist Africa. So it was reminding me about like even during that time, you know, that she's still elevating that during the apartheid. It's about like all of our people and everyone being involved in creating this change.
Yeah, and I honestly, it's something I struggle with. Like, I don't know, when I think and I read about stuff, but I don't know, like what she was talking about, the PAC, the Pan Africanist Congress, and folks in Azania, what they were struggling for, that non-racial or Azania and stuff like that. That's just, to me, that just shows how like gracious Black folks, Black Africans are. And so like, because that is an extreme compromise that I don't even know I would be, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I dig it. I dig it, because I guess, I don't know if I would do it, but that more power to them for saying that, because that's to me, it's insane. Fuck you guys. Y'all, like, if y'all came in here, if I can understand if the white folks, spilling out of Europe came and they came bearing gifts and, well wishes, but they came with violence and, disease and fucking and genocide and murderous intentions. And so, you guys have been here for what, 300, she said 1652 that they came to Azania and stuff like that and started colonizing them. Okay, so 300 years at that point in time. Okay, sure, yeah, but at the same time, you guys can leave. You didn't come. You guys came to take over and to murder, and we're still, the Black majority is still there. So what you're saying about you guys can stay here, but just understand that you guys are going to represent one Africa, and that you guys have a loyalty to Azania, and that you have to respect that. You have to respect our self-determination, that you're going to be under the democratic rule of the Black majority, and that it's going to be what the fuck we say is going on and how we decide to govern our people, and you guys are going to fall in line with that. That's how it's going to be. And I respect that. It's more than I would probably be willing to give if I became a leader somewhere, or like, I was like advocated for some shit. I'm like, I don't know. I'm trying to do what, land. I'm trying to take the land back from everyone possible. I don't know.
I won't lie. I struggled with that. Me 5 years ago would be like, oh, our people are loving, right? And I struggled with that. And I have to process it a little bit more to be transparent. So like, I'm just going to think like off the cuff, is like, I'm with you about the, I'm like about, that's our land. It doesn't belong to you. Go back to wherever your people came from. Y'all got to go. Y'all got to bounce. Right. And the reason why I'm in that space right in this moment is, our people are suffering. You know that folks who don't look like us, like folks who are European, like that's not your land, and you own more land than our own people. Like statistically, I was reading on the article that I'll definitely drop in the chat later that Ajama wrote, like some of the elements of the apartheid is there's like 59 million people there. And I think it was about 47 million are Africans in Azania, right? But 98% of people who are incarcerated are Africans and less than 2% are European. So you like see the continued like elements and devastations and disparities of Africans there, yet you're not doing anything about it. So you can go, all of y'all can go, our land, our country, go back to wherever your people come from, right? And they're like, it's Africa. The land belongs to Africans, like, period. So that's where I'm at. And also like lots of love and respect to our ancestor, Elizabeth Sibeko, for like sharing like her gracious words, thoughts, and experiences, like deep, heavy experiences of what was happening with our people and what was going on in the movement. And I'm like, y'all gotta go all the way out.
Exactly. And that's just, it's crazy because, that's, what she was talking about, how they moved them to, the least fertile areas. And you see how they did that, here to the indigenous folks over here. And so like, not only did you come and steal our land, fucking, you kicked us out and then you deliberately moved us to like these areas where you couldn't grow shit and the soil was fucking, unusable basically. And so that shit, you knew what the fuck you was doing. Like they knew what they were doing. And so like, yeah, like you said, you guys should probably leave, man. And if not, we'll just, we'll do what was that, Zimbabwe? What Robert Mugabe did and take the land back and stuff like that. And because it's ridiculous. And then they, they'll move us to the unfertile lands and stuff like that. But then, we see what they did with the indigenous people. Okay, they moved to the lands, but they were too fucking stupid at the time or too short-sighted to understand that those lands had fucking valuable resources under the ground. And so even though the soil might have not been necessarily usable for growing food and stuff like that, which is definitely important. But they, they were like, oh shit, we moved to some land that had hella oil. And so then instead of like respecting the sovereignty that you already fucking demolished anyway and tried to, give them some bullshit sovereignty, well then you're gonna fucking you're gonna do it again and run pipes through their holy land, through their spiritual lands and stuff like that, and repress and oppress the people, the indigenous peoples fighting for, the right to not have America fucking run leaking ass pipes all through their lands and stuff like that. And so, the measures that they've done, to me, like she said, it's too much. And this is why, like I understand reparations and everything like that, and I get it, but honestly, they owe all of us. To break off into like a little tangent, I saw some tweet on Twitter about where like people were saying that Black Africans should realize that like we honestly constitute an indigenous people too, just because, on the continent especially, and that viewing our struggle in that frame could also, could be of benefit to us. And I think that's important because it is a fight for land and it is something that, indigenous folks all over the world are fighting against and stuff like that, how they steal the land and then don't respect it when they move you to some bullshit. And like, not only did you guys take our shit and move us into some other place, but now that we're in this place and we're trying to like move forward and still resist in our own way, well, then you want to add some more shit and still more oppression and suppression and stuff like that. So it's just,
Yeah, it's never ending.
Yeah.
It's never ending because they're going to figure out something is on the land or a way to exploit us. It's never ending. And what you're sharing about like how this is stolen land and the impacts on indigenous people and like what's happening in the land, the air and the water. also caused by pipelines and also fracking and other things. Like that same shit is happening in Africa. I appreciate Comrade talked about it on, it was like called Ecofeminism. And I apologize that I can't remember her name, but it was on this show called Sunday School. And everything that she said that was happening there around like mining, pollution of water, it's like the same parallels here that I'm aware of like what's happening in Tiwa territory and like other territories in the indigenous lands surrounding Tiwa territory. And so it's the exact same thing, like no matter what, they're gonna find another element, another layer. So it's like you're continuing to create like as much harm as you can. You're like, oh, there's a comment in here about like reservations, right? Like forcing people, indigenous people to move on reservations and then like not providing the infrastructure like on the reservation, right? To have access to housing and water. So there's that intentionality, right? So like they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And knowing like which land has resources. Like we think about like the gentrification that we see happening in our communities, right? Where like whole ass like brown, African, indigenous communities don't even look like that anymore, right? They're like, so our communities that were considered in so much poverty, right? Again, that's their definition, are now like rich with resources. So they're like, oh, they're walkable communities. Oh, they're this. Like the neighborhood that I grew up in right now has houses from $250,000 to over $400,000. Like we can't even live there, but yet my neighborhood was on the news all the time as a kid, right? Lots of lies, right? There was a comment in here about like the role of capitalism and the lies it tells, right? And so lots of lies happening, but now it's like, oh, it's like a 6-block walk to all the main transportation structures. Oh, now you see the richness and the resources that are in the community. So it's like, oh, we're going to gentrify the heck out of it and like push you out as much as we can. So I think there's probably even like 3 African families left there. And my grandparents' home is there and they're always trying to get them to sell it. And I keep telling my auntie, don't sell it. Don't sell that. That belongs to us. This is still our community, even though it doesn't look like it. So, but in all the ways they find continued ways to like extract and take as much as they can, because that's what they do. That's what colonizers do. That's what capitalism does. And that's what we consistently see.
Yeah, and it's funny, like you're talking about how that, you know, how they do gentrification, and just like how that's like a small microcosm of the whole issue that basically this whole discussion has been about, you know, stealing land and forcing people out and slow death measures and separating families and stuff like that. Because, you know, a lot of these communities, like you said, I grew up in a community here called Park Hill, and really in general, it's like it's a neighborhood, but in general, the all of east side of Denver was Black and Hispanic. And it's just like the craziest thing whenever we go back there and stuff like that, and we go to our restaurants down there, or we just go see some families that are still there. It's just crazy because growing up there, there was really no white people. And when they had been there for forever, you know what I mean? Like they were the white people that just been there. And so, but now you see the fucking scooters, the pay scooters every fucking where. White folks tanning on the lawn, on their lawns and stuff like that, and running in the snow in fucking tiny ass pants, because that's what they do for some reason. I don't know why. It'd be snowing and they just be running at night. I don't know, but that's the shit you see now. And so it's just extremely unfortunate. And you know, like, you know, I'm kind of making light of the, you know, how the white people do, but at the same time, it's like it's a traumatic experience and stuff like that, and it actually has actual consequences for us, because we end up getting the short end of the stick every single time and stuff like that, and then we get blamed for bullshit and forced out of places that we've been in and losing community and stuff like that. And it's just, yeah, it's extremely unfortunate how they do it, and it's just, yeah, to me, gentrification is just a microcosm of the whole broader issue of how they decide to infiltrate and fucking disperse folks, the people that they don't want around, which is I mean, obviously always Black and brown folks, and colonized people worldwide. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's a comment in the chat about existing revolutionary formations must be strengthened on the continent as well as in the diaspora. Like, that is so true. That's so critical and important. And I think about strengthening that is also connected to political education. And this month they celebrate Women's Month internationally. And we know that we celebrate the role of the woman every single day, not just a month. And I was just thinking about when I was trying to do extra research to learn about Elizabeth Sibeko, and it could have been user error, but I found like that film, that interview many, many times, but I found more information about like men who were involved in the apartheid movement. And so like for me, I was reflecting on like the importance of when you talked about like community is like we have a responsibility in a community to like uplift women, because women have always been in the movement. Women have always led in the movement, and like celebrating women also is about like telling our stories. And so I'm have to definitely try to do more research. And so I hope that there's more research out there about the apartheid that talks about like women and their involvement, because that's something that I was like running into barriers. Again, it could have been user error. I know how to do research, okay, but I wasn't finding things. And I think about like women, we've always done that community care, like uplifting our communities, fighting for our people. And so as we celebrate, or as you see people in the social media world, or even in your job celebrating International Women's Month, also know that recognition was like started through socialism, right? To recognize women. And so that's not something that's supposed to be celebrating capitalist women, right? Who do nothing for our benefit, right? They're only connected to the petty bourgeois. So I won't even say names, because then if somebody comes in the middle of the video, they're like, oh, she's celebrating that person. But like, that's not who we uplift. That's not who we celebrate. They don't represent us. They don't represent our interest of self-determination, of liberation for our people. And so like, encourage you all to continue learning about revolutionary women and like learning about their stories and telling their stories as well. And that's something that I'm going to challenge myself to do.
Yeah, most definitely. Me too. Because, you know, like, I mean, all the stuff you said, you know, like, because it's, I don't know. I just get really frustrated because it's just, it shouldn't even, I don't know. Like, it's just obvious. It's just plain to see. It's right there how much, especially with African women, but I mean, you see it in every group of people, how the women of those people are they're the backbones, and they're the leaders, and they're the comforters, and you know, they're the glue that holds everything together of our movements and our people and stuff like that. Like, and so it's not just even African women. It's, you know, you see it with white women and Palestinian and Arab women and Asian women. You see how important and how integral. I mean, obviously, it just it just really frustrates me, the silencing of our women that's been going on for so long, from us, from, you know, Black people, from Black men, and obviously from the white folks in general, because they silence their women too. So why the fuck wouldn't, you know, obviously they're going to make it worse on Black women. But that's the thing, you know, like you said, it's just extremely important for us to always be trying to find to seek out women's voices on the views of the world and the struggle and the movement and stuff like that, because, you know, women, not only do they have voices, they have powerful voices, and they actually walk the walk almost all the time. They walk the walk for our people. and for our struggles and for our movements. And so, like she was talking about how the PAC had the women's union, and that's a part of why I love the AAPRP, because we got our women's union, and it's just to me, that's like an integral an important part of any organization. If you don't have a women's union or a women's wing that organizes amongst themselves, that can teach themselves, learn with themselves, but also teach the men in the organization and stuff like that, or learn with us. And if you don't have that, then it's just, I don't know, it's just, to me, it's almost disingenuous, because like she said in the video, it's not because women are like separate from the movement, but women have particular needs and they play a particular role in communities and in just in human life in general. Obviously, we know that women are the one who create the babies. It's not men who create it. We play what the 5 little fucking percent. And so maybe we should continue to play the 5% that we do. And, instead of, and, while we do that, obviously uplift the women and, hold them up and, support them. But we don't create the fucking babies. And so, yeah. And, it's not like that's what women are reduced to, but they, women play a particular role and have particular needs. And it's not like they're separate from the movement, but like she said, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, and like the women's wing is able to talk about like our issues as women and what we face, to also work to dismantle the patriarchy that exists as well. And so being able to have a women's ring allows like women to be in community together and have like those hard conversations. That's so critical. And men's role is just as important in the movement. We need all Africans across the diaspora. If you're African, being involved in an organization for the liberation of our people. So we need everybody involved in this work. But yeah, the women's wing isn't, it's allows women to do some of that other deep work that's also needed. And like men got to do their own work. And I can and y'all know what y'all have to do, so I won't speak for that. And so yeah, so to me, it's like, it reminds me of, I think Onyesawu talked about this before. It's like men benefit from patriarchy, right? And so we cannot expect them, and we've done this in some of our readings in AAPRP too. Oh, I'm trying to think of what it was. It'll come back to me in a minute, but it was about how, because men benefit from patriarchy, we cannot assume that they will try to dismantle it, right? So that's why women have to be involved in dismantling patriarchy and learning about it, how it impacts us, learning how to dismantle it, right? And those are things that like you can also do in the women's wing. So that's critical. I'm trying to think of the reading. It's gonna come to me because we did like 3 of them back to back.
Well, yeah, like you're saying, to me, that's like, as much as I can be, anti-patriarchy and stuff like that, at the same exact time, I've been indoctrinated with fucking 26 years of misogyny and all this stuff like that. So like, it's a continuous unlearning process for me and for men, any serious man. It's a continuous thing, and you can't think, oh yeah, well, I love women. I grew up with a mom and 3 sisters. I got, 6 aunts. And so, but that doesn't, you can say that all you want, but at the same time, you have to understand that you've been indoctrinated with patriarchy and misogyny for however long you've been alive, and it's integral into you and into society. And so you have to unlearn those things, those practices, and those thought patterns and mindsets, and you have to actively try, like you said, to be trying to dismantle patriarchy, like, because it's a whole intertwined system. It's a whole capitalist, imperialist patriarchy. And so racist patriarchy. And so like, you can't separate that from the larger fight against capitalism and imperialism and colonialism. You can't, because, they go hand in hand. And so, yeah, like as much as any man can say that, oh, I'm this and that, I don't think it's a thing that ever ends. I don't think you can ever get to the point where like, oh, I'm good, like I'm, we can all be saying we're fighting for it, but I don't know. I think it's a continuous process that goes that's something you have to be reading on and studying and trying to dismantle every single day. And so, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for elevating that about like the connection of patriarchy and capitalism, patriarchy and imperialism, like the intersectionality that exists there, and like the unlearning, unpacking, and like living it, and like continuous like building political consciousness. Like that's something that we all have to do, right? Build political consciousness about these different issues as we have like a one unified socialist Africa, because we are going to get it. We are going to get our land back. And that was also really clear to me in the Elizabeth Sibeko interview, is like the determination for fighting for our people. And so we're as determined as our ancestors also to continue that. And it's going to happen, right? And we were able to do that together, and learning about, like you were saying, they recycle practices that create harm. There are revolutionary practices that create liberation for our people. So we have those to learn from, like in Guinea-Bissau, in Cuba, in Haiti. So there are revolutionary movements that have happened, and we need to learn about those things that were there, and organize to fight for that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that like is always, that's why I like hearing, like I always just like obviously reading anything that revolutionaries wrote, but also I don't know, I just love hearing them talk and hearing them speak. And so like, you know, while I was watching Mama Elizabeth Sibeko talk, I don't know, it's just like, I don't know, for me, it's almost like therapeutic, even when they're talking about something that's like hard to stomach and to digest. It's just learning from them and hearing them speak. It helps me, and I don't know, it gives me, you know, like you're talking about, that determination to understand that, you know, we're gonna fight and we're not gonna stop, and that we're gonna give everything that we have to the movement, to the struggle, because folks like her and folks like you know, her comrades in Azania, that we owe them, we owe ourselves, and we owe our you know, the future generations to fight and to not give up. And you know, even when we might be discouraged or we might take L's, because we understand what the fuck we're up against, and we're up against this powerful ass crazy folks. We understand that we're going to take some L's, but at the same time, we have a, you know, a goal in mind, in that the only answer is a win. The only answer is to come out victorious, because otherwise you risk the end of humanity, to be completely honest. Like, I don't know if I don't think I'm really overstating that. And so, yeah, that's what, you know, so yeah, I love hearing from our elders and from the folks who have been in it, who have done it. And that's why I love that. I don't know, there was a video yesterday, a panel from a bunch of OGs and stuff like that, that were original gorillas, that Jackie Lukman and Rafiki was in there talking. Daruba talked for a little bit. Mama Tendai and stuff like that. So yeah, it was. I just love hearing that. I love being able to hear from our elders, because it gives me fucking, I don't know. It gives me revved up, and it makes me want to always keep going. And because I'm always sad and mad, but it just, you know, it helps me get directed. You know, they direct me into like a, you know, the right way to focus my energy. So yeah, I love that shit.
That's true. I always like reflect on how we carry the pain, but we carry that resistance, right? And so I got to check out that video. You got to send it to me. Like always trying to be motivated by our people. And so, yeah, our people are just so dope, you know, and just like it is healing. I agree with you. It is healing to know, like our people fought for us from the beginning. They always did. They always have, and we continue that work of our ancestors. So I do agree, like it's healing to know that, because that's not what we're taught. And so some sadness for sure, deep sadness and healing. I agree. I know we're coming close to closing. So I wonder if you had any final thoughts. I really appreciate the healing portion that you talked about. So that's also what I'm taking away as well. That's part of the revolution is also healing. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, I don't know. In final words, yeah, like you said, we're like, I think it's down to like the final 5 minutes. So yeah, I don't know. I guess what we ended up, what I'll end on is, like you talked about, we understand that this is um, uh, celebrating, International Women's Month, but I just want us to understand that, like you said, it has to be a continuous thing and an all-time thing, and we like the month and stuff like that, and we'll take it and we'll organize around it and everything like that as much as we can, but that is something that we have to do constantly, in that that just the fight for socialism and to radically change the structure of society is something that's heavy and something that is it comes with, like Elizabeth talked about in the fucking her interview, it comes with torture and it comes with deep repression and oppression in the loss of life of our people, but it's a fight worthy of us, and um there is no other option, and so we're losing time, not losing time, but time isn't really necessarily on our side, and so yeah, I just the fight is serious. We see it everywhere. We see how deep the propaganda is getting, how it has been, and how serious the empire is trying to grab hold of their last gas of breath. And so we see how dangerous it can be for us. And so I hope everyone's can be safe. And I hope we all learn some fucking shit and use it to fight this fucking beast. So yeah, sorry for all the cuss words, but yeah.
It is a beast. So definitely, if you're not involved in an organization, get involved. Definitely research revolutionary strategies. There's also Kwame Nkrumah's book, Handbook for Revolutionary Warfare. I'm diving back into that. Recommend that you read that as well. And so we got to be organized, get organized. We have to stay ready for the revolution, because like it's a must, right? There's, like you said, Rashad, there's no option. And that's what we saw in this video interview with Elizabeth Sibeko. The fight was critical. The fight, and they were fighting, right? The apartheid lasted for those over 40 years, and the people were fighting, and the people are still fighting. So thank you all so much for joining us for our monthly Pan-African film series. It happens every second Saturday of the month at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We hope that you'll be joining us. And then we also have Pan-African Weekly News that happens every first and third Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. And we appreciate this conversation, this dialogue, and stay ready for the revolution.
See y'all.